The maternity ward ran on fluorescent light and thin blankets. It was colder than the man who stood by the door. Mireia Solares lay exhausted, cradling the child she had fought into the world. Beside her stood Cassian Rourke, a man who made empires, move with a phone call, staring, as if he'd stumbled into someone else's problem. "This child isn't mine," Cassian said, flat and practiced, like an executive reciting a policy. He didn't glance at the newborn's face. He turned and left. To Cassian, it was nothing. To Mireia, it was everything. Cassian wasn't unusual among the gilded. He lived as if gravity served him personally. Employees were parts. Women were scenery. He wore power like a tailored suit and mistook compliance for truth. Mireia had been another quiet shape in his world. The maid who blended into marble. Moving silently with laundry, serving dinners he forgot he'd eaten, tidying the wreckage of parties he barely remembered hosting. He never asked what she dreamed of. He never imagined she did. One late night, loneliness met entitlement. After too many fingers of expensive whiskey, Cassian pulled Mireia into his orbit. Not with tenderness, but with the brute force of habit. For him it was a release. For her it was confusion wrapped in fear. Morning reset the machine. He glided back into meetings and markets. She went back to polishing the life she could never afford to live in. Consequences arrived the day Mireia told him she was pregnant. Cassian's face didn't change. He slid an envelope across a granite counter. "Handle it," he murmured, as if delegating a minor task. When she refused, he gave a cold little smile. "You will not trap me with a child. I don't want you. I don't want it." The months that followed were a long hallway of stares and whispers. Mireia carried alone. She worked until her ankles swelled, slept sitting up when the nausea took over, and learned the skill of ignoring sympathy that sounded like pity. When the contractions came, fear and resolve braided together. She gave birth with no hand to hold but her own. Cassian appeared only to confirm his certainty. He took in the sight of Mireia with the baby, recoiled from the idea, and delivered the sentence, "Not mine." Then he left her with the bill and the silence. Silence, however, is a poor anesthetic. In a house that echoed when the staff went home, Cassian's glass no longer smothered the sound of a newborn's thin cry. He saw the hospital room when he closed his eyes, Mireia's arms forming a shield around something small and fragile. Pride held the line. Friends told him what he wanted to hear over cigars and claret. "You did the smart thing, Rourke. They all try this. Stay the course. Curiosity is stubborn." Weeks later, Cassian returned to the hospital under the pretext of a donation. From the doorway he saw Mireia in a chair by the window, rocking slowly. She adjusted the blanket, and the baby blinked awake. Cassian froze. The eyes, steel grey, cool as winter light. His eyes, his father's eyes, his grandfather's eyes. An inheritance that had skipped every lawyer and trust to appear in a face barely old. Enough to focus. He stumbled into the hall and leaned against the wall, breath shallow. He had denied his own blood. He had called a legacy a lie. When he spoke to Mireia again, she let the quiet stretch thin between them. "You used me," she said at last, the words deliberate, edged. "You left me to carry him alone. You don't get to fix that with a speech." For the first time in a long time, Cassian felt the actual weight of his choices. It was heavier than his money and less portable. On a night stitched with rain, he drove to the walk-up where Mireia now lived. The elevator was broken. He climbed. The hallway smelled like dust and laundry soap. He knocked until the chains slid back and the door opened a hand's width. Mireia's expression was a locked door in its own right. Inside, the baby slept in a thrift store crib. Cassian moved closer. A soft rustle, a small stretch, and then those grey eyes were on him again, unblinking. The ground shifted inside his chest. He knelt. Words failed. Tears did not. "I was wrong," he whispered to the crib rail. "He's mine. I see him." Mireia stood with her arms crossed. The well of tears she'd emptied in the hospital was stone now. "You can't erase what you said," she told him. "You can't erase the months I begged the air for help. You can't make me forget that you treated me like I was disposable." Cassian didn't argue. The boardroom general had no weapon that mattered here. He started coming back. Not with NDAs or checks. With hands, with time. He learned the choreography of bottles and burping cloths. He changed his first diaper and did it badly, then better. He sang lullabies in a voice rough with shame, songs he hadn't heard since the last time his own mother had been well enough to sing to him. Each small gesture broke something, brittle inside him, and replaced it with something tender and terrifying. Mireia didn't forgive on schedule. She watched. She weighed patterns, not promises. She measured consistency the way accountants measure risk. He kept showing up, not to rescue his reputation, not to buy absolution, but to be a father. Cassian's fortune didn't vanish, but it shrank in importance, like a skyscraper seen from far away. Quarterly earnings meant less than the sound of a laugh in a tiny apartment, whose heat clanked on and off. The polished table in his dining room felt emptier than a second-hand rocking chair by a window with peeling paint. He noticed he'd built a life that could host 100 people and still feel vacant. Here, in 3 rooms and a crib, there was something you couldn't cater. Years went by. The boy, named Leon Solaris, Rourke, never learned about the night he was rejected. He learned the shape of his father's hand, the roughness of his stubble when he kissed a forehead goodnight, the ridiculous faces grown men will make to win a giggle. He learned that men can break and then bend differently. Mireya did not forget. Scars don't promise amnesia, but anger cooled into boundaries, and boundaries left room for trust to grow in, one careful inch at a time. Cassian never asked to be congratulated for doing what he should have done from the start. He simply kept doing it. What did Cassian learn? That the cheapest luxury is cruelty, because anyone can afford it. That the rarest wealth is humility, because it costs everything you think you are. He traded a portion of his power for presence, and discovered, to his astonishment, that presence is the heavier currency. He still signed deals. He still flew private sometimes. But the best seat he ever took was on a nursery floor at 3 a.m., back against a dresser, holding a sleepy child whose breath slowed against his shirt. In that dim room, he found something more complicated and more beautiful than victory. The world remained loud and strange. Money still moved mountains. But in a walk-up with a stubborn elevator, Cassian Rourke learned to move a different kind of weight. A bottle to a mouth, a story to a waiting ear, a hard apology across a chasm he had dug himself. He never pretended the chasm wasn't there. He built a bridge and crossed it, again and again. The greatest poverty is not a thin bank account. It's a thin heart. Cassian learned to make deposits where it mattered. If this story moved you, tap the like, subscribe for more human tales, and tell us where you're listening. From our little community is big, enough for every city and every story. Stay kind, stay curious, and keep the light on for one another.